Cool. Dorsey, it's wonderful to meet you, sir. Thank you for taking a minute out today. I appreciate it.
Absolutely, Joe. Thank you for having me.
Yes, sir. So before we get into your good work, I want to know this. 5 years ago, the pandemic threw everybody into a tailspin, right? Just absolute unknown. How did you make it through the global pandemic, and how has it reverberated into what you do today?
Ooh, that's a great question. Well, I was living in New York at the time when it first started, when it first came out, and my sister, towards the end of 2020, or towards like the middle of it, my sister decided that she was going to, move to North Carolina.
Yeah.
So because I was living with my sister at the time, my dad and I, we decided that we would have to live in, move, and we really wanted to stay in New York. My dad former military, he had his burial site and everything in New York, and so we really wanted to stay in New York, and we looked around. We just couldn't really find anything affordable to live there. And I knew I went to school in PA. I knew people in PA. I still know people in PA. So we're like, hey, why don't we just move to Pennsylvania? And we did. So a little backtracking there. I did a podcast interview with a friend of mine, because like you're saying, everything's, upside down now with the pandemic, everything's shut down, nobody's really doing anything, nobody's really going anywhere.
Yeah.
I really couldn't do my speaking engagement at that time. Everything had shut down. And the guy was like, hey, I'm doing a podcast, where I interview people. Why don't you come on the show and I'll interview you? Excuse me.
Oh, you're fine.
Why don't you interview me? Well, I'll interview you. I was like, yeah, that sounds good. What not? Why not? And I did, and then I came off of that show. I was like, hey, that's really interesting thing. Maybe that's something that I could, do, and that I could look into doing. So I did some research on it. You know, got my platform set up, and I started, interviewing some of my friends and whatnot, and and it started snowballing, and that's how the Dorsey Ross show, which I am the host of, that's how that got started.
Right on. So let's get to the essence of exactly what you do right now in 2025. I'm going to put you in front of kids. They always get the truth out of us. It's career day. They're 12 years old. One of the kids in the room is like, hey, what do you do for a living? How do you answer them?
Well, I answer that in two parts.
Okay.
I answer it as um I am a cashier at a retail store,
Uh-huh.
and I'm a guest advocate at a retail store, but I am also the host of a podcast show where I interview people of faith and people who have stories of overcoming obstacles and overcoming trials and tragedies that they have had that they have had to face in their life, and I share their stories to whoever wants to listen to them.
So let me ask you this. When you were a kid, what did you want to be when you grew up? What was your dream job?
Well, there were a few of them that I actually had, and obviously, we talked about this a little bit,
Yeah.
beforehand. All I think all boys, and young kids, young teenagers want to be athletes. They want to be out on that baseball field or that football field. They want to be playing for the New York Mets. But I also thought about, because of what I had to deal with growing up, I thought about, being a nurse and giving back to the people, giving back to that feeling of how they helped me. I can, get back to helping people. And I also thought about going into the computer field
Yeah.
and working with computers and working with technology. And toward my upper years and upper teenage years, I wanted to go into, ministry and being, one day becoming a youth pastor.
So take me back to the beginnings in New York. What were the foundational seeds that have allowed you to overcome, to evolve, to become who you are, to have such optimism and to find your faith? How did all of this kind of evolve into who you are today?
Yeah, well, I think one of the things was my faith, was my faith in God, and I think and obviously that's the number one thing, but also it's my parents. My parents were there who supported me. They always allowed me to figure out for myself what I could and could not do, and couldn't wasn't very much. I obviously, we all have them, but I have my own limitations. I can't lift my hand above my head. I only have 9 fingers because the doctor couldn't, separate my fingers, and because my fingers were fused together at birth, so they had to operate a lot on my fingers and a lot of my on my hands. But it was my parents who pushed me to go out there. They didn't put me in a bubble and say, "Well, Dorsey has this disability and he's not going to be able to do this or be able to, ride a bike or be able to play baseball in the streets like we used to and play football or play basketball, different things of that nature." So, a lot of the overcoming and a lot of the, overcoming the obstacles that I had to face, it, it allowed me to overcome that because of my parents.
My son's 20, his name's Miles, he's on the spectrum. And I have always pushed him to do all these things. There's always been this, well, can he do it? Is he able? It's like he can do whatever he wants. I remember pushing him to get on the bike and we'd play catch and throw the ball around and do all of that. And I think that's the beauty of parents. You have to just operate as though everything is like any other kid. You got to go out and do it. What's the worst that's going to happen?
Right?
You're going to skin your knee, you're going to fall down, you might feel bad, but everybody does that. Everybody
Yeah,
has these moments, no matter who you are, where you feel down or you feel exuberant. Like you just have to live life. You got to go out and do it. And that's the only way?
right. Well, if you don't mind, I want to say something about your son and being on the spectrum.
Yeah.
I was watching Survivor. I don't know if you're a big Survivor fan on TV.
Uh-huh.
And there was a woman on there the last season of Survivor, and the woman was on the show. And she came out in one of the episodes and said that she was a on the spectrum,
Yeah.
and she had some issues that she had to face. And towards the end of it, it came out also that she was a PhD candidate,
Wow.
and she came in third place on that show.
Wow. That's it, man. That's you just have to have the right people rallying around you and you can absolutely do anything. I'm kind of reading a book now called The Gene Code, and it talks about the influences that you bring in, the positivity that you bring into you can literally affect your genome, can affect your DNA. And it's like all of those moments will lead to that confidence and overcoming. And you hear stories about this all the time that people that were told they were never going to walk or they were never going to talk, they were going to not do things, and they did, and they're actually doing just fine. So it's like there's a lot of things that we can do as human beings. We can do anything.
Yeah, well, go. Doctors told my parents when I was born that I had no skull opening, which I did at birth. I had no skull opening, and my mom was 41, my dad was 45 when they had me, and so I was the surprise birth of the family. My mom and my dad already had two grown kids, and so the doctor said He has no skull opening, he has no sore spot. He'll be brain dead. Put him into a institution. He won't. He won't survive. And my parents said, "Well, we can't do that. We're not going to give up on the child that God has given them." And they said, "We won't sign the papers. We'll just take him home and see what will happen."
Yeah.
And I've gone to college. I got two associate degrees, one bachelor's degree. I'm an author. I'm a podcast host.
You're a miracle. That's all there is to it. I mean, at that point,
Absolutely.
yeah, you're a miracle. So we kind of talked a little bit before we came on here about being a Mets fan and baseball and kind of that whole thing. Other than your parents, who's been a hero for you? Has there been kind of a public figure that's inspired you, that's overcome, or that you've looked up to?
Um, you, that's a great question. Not particularly. I mean,
Okay.
like, there's some people, that I see. You may not know the name because he's not, famous and whatnot, but
Sure.
the name is Rooney Erickson Tata.
Yeah.
He is the founder of Special Touch Ministries, and in back in 1980, 1970, he was in California. He jumped over off one of the rocks into the water, and she ended up breaking her neck. And for most of her life, she's been paraplegic in a wheelchair.
Wow. So let me ask you this. What is the motivation for you every day to do this work that you do, to evolve as a human being, to be who you are, to influence and spread light to people? What is that light for you every day?
It's God. It's my
Yeah.
faith in God that keeps me going, that keeps me wanting to, inspire people, that wanting me to encourage people. I can probably guarantee that if it wasn't for God, I probably wouldn't be doing it.
The one thing about being spiritual is that we all have these moments sometimes of actually feeling the creator, feeling God, feeling that spirit. Have you had a moment like that that's confirmed to you that this makes sense, being a spiritual being, believing in God? Have you ever had a moment like that?
Absolutely, I've had several of them, over my lifetime. Where I felt, God in the room, and he felt like he was, speaking to me at that moment, telling me not to give up, telling me to keep going, telling me, hey, I have greater plans and greater purposes for your life.
So let's say you have a dream tonight. You run into a much younger version of you, say 15 years old, right? And you can tell that version of you, give that version of you a piece of advice based on this life you've led, all of the things that you've accomplished, everything you've overcome. What advice would you give that young version of you?
Don't give up.
Yeah.
Don't give up. Know that there will be trials and tribulations ahead of you, that there will be difficulties ahead of you, but know that, but know that, in the end, things will get better. At the end of those trials, at the end of those tribulations, things will get better, and you'll be a better person after you overcome those trials and those tribulations.
So, as a public figure that has a podcast that puts your story out there, that illuminates other people's stories, people hear your voice, they know who you are. What's something fun and interesting, a fun story about you that they may not understand about you or who you are? Is there a story like that? Maybe the best game that you ever went to, one of your favorite concerts, just a fun story, a fun fact about you.
Yeah, a fun story for me that comes to my mind right now is is I was in community college at the time, and I was talking to, I saw a female friend of mine pass by, and think about her. And at the time, I had one of those, you know, backpacks that had wheels on it, so I was pulling that behind me,
Yeah.
and she, walked past me. I'm, still, looking behind me, saying goodbye to her, and by the time I looked, I turned around to see what was in front of me. It was too late, and I walked straight into a lamppost,
Oh no.
not realizing that it was gonna, not realizing what I was walking into, and it was the lamppost. And I went into a club at the time that I was a part of on that campus, and I saw one of my friends who I was close to, and he's like, "What happened to you?" I was like, "Well, I didn't listen to you. I was looking at the girls, and I walked into a lamppost."
There you go. That's awesome. So let me ask you this: if everything that you've done and achieved, and more importantly, evolved to at this point in your life, what are you the proudest of?
Graduating college,
Yeah.
because I had a high school history teacher who I admit it, I struggled in school, and I didn't do well in school. But I had this high school history teacher in high school. I went to a school, give you a little background on that. I went to a school for people with disabilities,
Yeah.
and it was a strictly school for that. And I went from kindergarten or even pre-kindergarten all the way up to high school in for that school. 'Cause I never knew any other school. I didn't know public education, anything of that nature. And this high school history teacher was at this meeting, and we were there. My mom was there, and again, my mom, as I said earlier, my mom was great, and my dad still is a great support of me and what I do and what I want to do. And they had asked him, "Do you think that Dorsey will be able to make it in college?" And he said, "No, I don't think that Dorsey will be able to make it in college. I don't think he has the ability to make it in college." And then they asked me, and I said, "Yeah, I think I can make it," not knowing, what I was going to get myself into going to college. And then they asked my mom, and my mom said, "Well, if he thinks he can make it, he will."
And you did. That's beautiful. So let me ask you this. At the end of the day, everyone has a perception of you. Family, friends, everyone that listens to your podcast, everyone that works with you and knows you, but you run the show. What's your
Right.
perception of you? Who do you think you are?
I hope I'm the best person and the best version of myself,
Yeah.
and what I want to be. You know, I hope I'm the best person. I hope I'm the best version of myself, the best person I could be to encourage other people, the best person I can be to inspire other people. No one's perfect. No one's going to be perfect all day every day, and we would and we never will be. But I still hope that you know I can be me, the best version of me, every day.
So if anyone wants more, they want to reach out, they want to get involved with your writing, they want to get involved with your podcast, any of the good work you're doing with your ministry, how do they do that?
Well, you can contact me on all my social media sites. I'm on Twitter. I'm on Instagram. My podcast website is www.dorseyross.com.
Excellent. I will put
I'm
all of that in the show notes. Absolutely.
I'm
Dor
also on Facebook as well.
Okay. All right, cool. And I will make sure to get all of those in the show notes. Dorsey, this has been great, man. What a great story. Thank you so much. And coming from, being a father of a special needs son, it's like there's so many things that you talked about that were absolutely inspirational, and you're living proof of it. And obviously from the word go, you've been a miracle. So thank you so much for your story
Amen.
and for your time.
Thank you, Joe.
Yes, sir. Hey, and real quick, we're officially out. I got a question. Would you go on record by saying that you would love to see Dwight Gooden in the Hall of Fame?
I would, yeah.
Okay, let me just do a Mets segment real quick here.
Okay.
So, Dorsey, hey, thank you again. We just interviewed, but I talked to you about my Dwight Gooden story. Do you believe that Dwight Gooden should be in the National Hall of Fame in Cooperstown?
Absolutely.
Okay. So, what's your best memory, whether it's of Dwight Gooden or the New York Mets, being a Mets fan? What's one of your favorite memories?
I actually got to meet Dwight Gooding and Dow Strawberry both in my lifetime.
Wow. What was it like? What was the feeling of being around them?
It was awesome. It was definitely an awesome experience meeting both of them, and being able to meet them and getting to see them in person.
Meeting Dwight Gooden, you don't really, it's like when you go in to meet your hero, you're always told, be careful. But
Right.
Dwight was such a warm person. He was so nice. There was just this warmth that radiated. And that's one of the reasons why I feel like what he's done off the field and what he's done with his life and his stats hold up absolutely well against anybody in that class of pitchers that went up for the Hall of Fame at the time. I just feel like we need to get to a point in this balloting for the Hall of Fame to recognize that people have their off-field lives, but they also can change, and they can also stand behind this. I mean, this guy, he threw a no-hitter at 31 for the Yankees, won a championship with them, won a championship with the Mets, had a stellar long career. It's just like, I just feel like it's a no-brainer,
Yeah.
you know? So, well, hey, man, Dorsey, thank you for putting the word out. I will send over the petition, and
Okay.
hopefully we'll get another signature on it. And again, this has been an absolute joy. Thank you, sir. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Joe.
Thank you.
Hello, friends. Joe Dimino here. I just wanted to let you know that after 30 years or so, I have finally released my first book of poetry through the mighty Spartan Press here in Kansas City, Missouri. As the creator and host of both Neon Jazz Radio and the Famous Interviews with Joe Dimino podcast, along with being a visual artist, I'm ready to embark on a new adventure and want you to be a part of it. You can get a copy online via Barnes & Noble, Amazon, and actually on the streets in Kansas City at the great Prospero's bookstore off 39th Street. You can also visit joedimino.com for links to the book, to more poetry, and everything in my world, including paintings. Thanks for all of the love and support over the years, and please dig the words.